Hey, what's up everybody? Today we are animating text within Propresenter. Actually, Propresenter can't do that by itself, but we are really pushing the bounds of what Propresenter can do by animating text within After Effects and bringing it into Propresenter to use in your worship services. So this is a two-part series. In the first part, we are animating the text, and then in the second part, my buddy Paul is taking what I'm creating in After Effects and bringing that into Propresenter to show you how you can use that within your worship services. So this is a two-part series. So if you haven't checked out Paul's channel yet, I definitely recommend you do so because his channel focuses on church and worship tech, and I personally have learned a lot about Propresenter from his tutorials, so I'm honored to be doing this series with him. I'm really excited about that. And if you haven't heard of Smart Design yet, this is smartdesign.church, where we use the power of video and graphics and media to reach people for Jesus and grow the kingdom of God and ultimately change people's lives. So today we are animating in After Effects, so without further ado, let's jump on in. Alright, let's go ahead and jump into After Effects. So as you can see, this is a fairly simple animation. There's not a ton going on here, but that's kind of intentional. First of all, we don't want to spend a ton of time on all these lyrics, but even more importantly, this is a worship service, and we have to keep that in mind, and we don't want this to be completely distracting. We just wanted to add a little bit of a visual interest, a little bit more than something you can do in Propresenter. So let's just jump in and start creating this. So first, we want to make a new composition. So we'll hit the new composition button and make it a 1920 by 1080 comp. And we can name this, let's just say final, is my always go-to. The duration, let's set that to about a minute. And we'll hit OK. All right, so let's first of all make a text layer by hitting our text tool up here and typing in angels we have heard on high. And I'm not great with lyrics, so what I ended up having to do is Google the lyrics for angels we have heard on high, and honestly I was just copying and pasting what we have in here because I mess up the lyrics and I don't want to type in the wrong words. So I'm going to kind of center that up, and if we really want to make sure that it's center, we'll just hit our align panel right here, and if you don't see that, just go up to window and align and make sure it's on composition, hit the center up button, and then we have it centered up. And if I want to move it up and down, I just hit shift on my keyboard and it locks in that either X or Y coordinate. So we'll bring it about here-ish. Move it up just a hair. All right, so now let's just duplicate this. So I'm going to hit this layer and do Command D, or you can go to Edit and Duplicate. And let's move this layer down. So now I just want the next line of the song, which is sweetly singing over the plains. And we'll just select all that text and paste it in there. I want to make the text a little bit different, so I'll select the text by doing Command A and hitting our drop down, and let's set it to regular instead of extra bold. So let's scale this up a little bit to make it match the width. Just a hair, there we go. And let's bring this down with our arrow keys just a little bit more. All right, so now let's quickly animate these in. So I'm going to select both of these layers and hit P and then Shift T. So that's opening up our position properties, and then you're saying also open up our transparency or opacity properties. So we want to add a keyframe. So I'm just going to click all of these and to add a keyframe. And we're going to go like half a second in time, so not even a full second, and hit another keyframe. So now we'll go back to our first keyframe, and this is what we want our initial position to be. So angels we have heard on high, let's move that a little bit over here. Sweetly singing over the plains, let's move that a little bit over here. And let's crank the opacity all the way down for both of them. So now if we have this animation, it looks like this, which is exactly what we're going for. But the only thing is I want to select all of these and hit F9 on my keyboard. And what that does is it gives it an easy ease, which just smooths out the motion. It's not as like robotic. It slowly comes to a stop as it gets closer to its final position. There we go. And if you don't see that, if you don't have an F9 key on your keyboard for some reason, you can right click and go to Keyframe Assistant and hit Easy Ease. So let's take a look at our examples. So these come in, and then we have it open up to our next line. So let's do that. So one thing I also noticed is Sweetly Singing Over the Plains comes in just a little bit later. So we're just going to click and drag this layer back just a little bit to give it a little bit of a delay. And then what we want to do is add a null object. So what the null object will do is it's going to be kind of the controller for all of these different layers as they move together. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, and Null Object. So now if we select both of these layers, our text layers, and hit this parent pick whip and link it to the null objects. See what happens if I hit my rotate tool and I have my null object selected. If I rotate this, all of our text will do exactly what the null object does. If I scale it up, it will scale as well. So that gives us a lot of control over a lot of different layers at one time. That way we're not animating everything individually. So we'll have these animate in, give it a little bit of time so Paul in the Propresenter tutorial can make a cut and make a stopping point. And then we want it to rotate and move to the sides. So what I'm going to do with the null object is after about half a second or so, I'm going to hit R on my keyboard and hit a keyframe for the rotation, move a little bit in time, and actually let's hit F9 on the keyboard while that's selected to give it an easy ease, and then we'll rotate it by 90 degrees. So now we have a simple rotation. But the other thing we want to have happen is for these two words to spread apart. So what we're going to have to do is do that manually within the text. So let's select both of these and their positions. Let's add a keyframe, and then towards the end of this, let's add another keyframe, and then just separate these. Just go ahead and select this text, and we'll pull it out this way, and then select this text, and we'll pull it out this way. So now if we play this back, it opens itself up. Okay, so now we want text to reveal itself in the middle. So before we have to animate any sort of reveal, let's just add that text, shall we? So while we are in this rotated position, we want to make sure we're past the rotating and then add another text layer. So what's our next line here? And the mountains in reply. So I'll just copy that, add a text layer, and paste that in. Let's make this a two-liner, shall we? So I'm going to enter down, and then let's bold this, and then let's bring it up, the scale up just a little bit. Alright, so I'm going to center that up about there. Let's do what we did earlier and align it to the center. Alright, so right now that text is not connected to anything, it's just sitting there. But if we, after the rotation, connect it to our null, it is also connected to it, and we'll do the exact same rotation as the null. However, you got to make sure that your playhead is once the rotation is over, because say you do it in the middle, and we link that up and hit our null object. Now it's all messed up because when it ends, it's going to look like this. So let's back up and make sure we do it right. And there we go. So now we want to set this up so that it reveals as those two side texts kind of open up and to reveal that. So there's a couple different ways we can do that, but in this situation, probably the easiest way to make that happen is just to do it with a mask and keyframe it, because it's a very simple movement and animation. So let's first of all add a mask. So we are going to hit the "and the mountains in reply" text layer, and then hit our rectangle tool, and that will add a mask around our text. So we just want to add a full mask and kind of set it so each side is right by the text that is revealing this text. So I'll set a keyframe at the end of this rotation animation for the mask path, and if you don't see this, you can select your text, hit MM on the keyboard to open up your mask path, hit the keyframe button. I'm going to hit F9 on the keyboard and go to the end, and now I want to bring our mask in. So I'm going to double click on our mask and kind of bring that in, and then I'm going to hit Command on my keyboard, and that's just going to bring both sides in at the same time. and then I'll bring it about there. So that's just about hidden. Obviously we can still see it, but what I can do is trim this layer so you don't see it until it starts moving. So we'll trim it about there, and now you don't even realize that it's there. All right, and the last line for this verse, all I did was kind of add a text layer right above this one, and it kind of scaled up. So really we're just using the same kind of principles and techniques that we have been using. So what we want to do is leave a little bit of a gap for Paul to put the stop point, and then I'm going to, on my null, I'm going to add a scale property. So we'll hit the keyframe and add an easy ease, of course, like I do on everything, and move a little bit in time and scale this up. And we actually probably want to add a position to this as well. I should have thought of that. So let's do Shift P and then hit our stopwatch to add a position keyframe, F9 of course, and we'll add the same keyframe here. And then we'll move this down on the second keyframe to about there-ish. Okay, so now we would just want to add our text layer. So what's our last line here? Echoing their joyous strains. We'll copy that, add a text layer, and then move this just on top. And we want to make sure that we're able to see it. So we'll move it about there. And then, of course, we need to link it to our null. So once it is big and it is in its place, once the null gets smaller, it's going to get smaller as well. Alright, so we're almost done. However, we have this problem where echoing their joyous strains stays there, but we kind of want it to come in about here. So we could add a mask to this. That is definitely an option, but I'm just going to add a fade. So let's hit T on the keyboard, and I'm going to bring the opacity all the way down, and then click to add a keyframe, move a little bit forward, and then bring it up. So as that rotation is happening, that text appears. And really, if we wanted to, we can have this happen as the scale is happening too. So we can bring these keyframes over and have it kind of look like this if we wanted to. Alright, so now we have the whole verse done, but now we want to do the chorus. And basically, you know the chorus, it goes, Gloria in excelsis Deo. And it does that over and over. That's the whole chorus. So let's actually just make a composition for our chorus. So let's make a new comp and label it chorus, 1920 by 1080, and yeah, that's all fine. So what that will end up doing is we just make it one time, and if we want to duplicate that over and over and over, we can do that super easily. So what I did on our example is something like this. So let's make all those letters come in individually. So let's hit our text layer and just make a G. And I don't want it to be that thick, especially because it's flying by the camera. So let's make it like a regular. Scale that baby up. And slap it in the middle about here. And then what we want to do is make this a 3D layer. So we want this to fly by the camera. So I'm going to make this a 3D layer by hitting the 3D button and then hit our position. And what we'll do is we will bring this closer and further from the camera from the Z axis here. You got X, Y, and Z. So let's set a position keyframe, and I will set another one like maybe a second in time, or not even a second, and hit the keyframe there. So on that keyframe, we want this to be past the camera. So I'm going to click and drag to make this go past the camera. And now in this keyframe, we want it to be super small. So maybe, I don't know, even like, that's super far away. But maybe something like that. Yeah, that'll be fine for now, and I'll bring this scale down, make sure that this still flies past, not quite. All right, now let's just duplicate this, and then offset it just a little bit, a couple frames, 2 or 3 frames is all it needs, and then double click and make that an L. And I found with the L, it actually doesn't fly past, so we have to adjust that. So I'm gonna hit U on the keyboard and and adjust where the position of the L ends up being, because it actually just blocks the camera. And then I'm going to copy the G, because the G and the O have very similar shapes. And then I'm going to bring this a couple frames back, just like I did, and then make this an O, and then just do this a few times with the rest of the letters. Alright, so all the letters done. We have a problem with the I and the A, and actually the R as well. So it's pretty simple. Once it gets to the last keyframe, just cut it off. Let's make that one keyframe longer. And then it looks like it's actually flying past the camera. So we get to that point of the I, and then we'll just cut it off by doing Alt and then right bracket. And then the same thing with the A. We'll just cut it off, Alt right bracket. That one might stay for a hair too long. There we go. Alright, so now we have the first Gloria. And then let's duplicate one of these O's and make this the full word. So just double click and we'll type Gloria. And now we don't want this one to fly past the camera, so let's bring this back just a little bit, but we also want to adjust the final position so it doesn't fly quite past the camera, but just come up so it reveals its full word. And then the last step is to add the In Excelsis Deo. So let's just add another text layer. And let's lock all of these text layers so I don't accidentally click and edit those. And I don't really know how to spell In Excelsis Deo, so I'm just going to copy and paste it like I have been doing. We'll scale that down to kind of match the width. And then we will animate each of these on. So I'll hit the drop down arrow, hit Animate and Opacity. And then on this animator, I'm going to crank the opacity all the way down and then open up the range selector. And now I can, once I bring these up, you can see that it's revealing each of these letters. So I'm going to hit the keyframe on Start, move forward just a little bit, and crank it all the way to 100%. So now it reveals each of these letters, but personally I want it to reveal each word, not each letter. So I'll open up Advanced, and instead of characters, I'll change that to words. So now it reveals each word together. So now if I go into my final, what I realized is I did not finish this. So what we want to do is make this kind of scale off the screen. So I'll hit my null, give it a little bit of time, and add a keyframe on both the position and scale. Move forward a little bit and scale this null up, and then basically just move this out of the frame. And then once that is out of the frame, we can add our chorus. So let's just take our chorus composition and dump that on top. So now we have "And the mountains in reply, echoing their joyous strains, Gloria in Excelsis Deo." Okay, and before we wrap up, I need to show you a really important part in this whole process, and that's exporting so it will work with Propresenter. So what we need to do is, once we're in our final composition here, and make sure your in and out points are set where you want them. So I'll make sure that it's after In Excelsis Deo. That's where my out point is. So I'm going to go to Composition, Add to Render Queue. All right, so we have it in here, and if we go under Output Module, it'll take us to those output settings. So we have Format QuickTime. If yours isn't set to that automatically, set it to QuickTime. And then if you go into the Format Options and under Video Codec, go ahead and hit Apple ProRes 4444. I'll hit that and hit OK. And then the last thing I want to do is under Channels, instead of hitting RGB, hit RGB plus alpha. And then hit OK. So what the RGB plus alpha does is it takes everything that's black in here, and that's why we didn't add any background. It takes everything that's black in here and makes it a see-through layer. So when Paul takes this file and puts it into Propresenter, we can put whatever background we want behind the text that is animating here. So if you want to go ahead and check out that tutorial, go ahead and click right here, and you can check out the tutorial that Paul's doing all about bringing this into Propresenter and making it work in your worship services. For more videos like this, go ahead and subscribe to this channel, where we talk about using the power of media to reach people for Jesus. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.